Hi, my name is Reiko Anderson, and hopefully you just watched the intro to AAC video, and you have learned about modeling, and you have learned about concepts like core vocabulary, and you're ready to learn specifically about your core Fringe book that you're using to support your student. Again, we have the slide here, and my email address is on there if you have specific questions for me and I'm supporting your team. Otherwise, please contact your AAC SLP or email us at our general email address, aacslp@sd44.ca. So in this video, we're going to be looking at a few things. We're going to be looking at core Fringe book features just generally, and we're going to be looking at customization and classroom implementation. So again, just to review from our last video, there are different types of AAC: light tech, low tech, and high tech. This AAC system is a paper-based system that was created using technology, so it's considered a light tech system. Some people also just call them paper-based systems, but that's the category of AAC that we're talking about today. So core Fringe book features. These symbols are from Boardmaker. So some of these may be really familiar to you. We have core vocabulary here, which you just learned about. There's things like pronouns, different parts of speech, and then over here we have Fringe vocabulary pages with some tabs to help with the organization. We're going to look at the food page. This is just a sample, so there's only a few pages here, but your student might have lots more pages than that. So we have some color coordination going here. It's called the Modified Fitzgerald scheme, if anyone is interested, but that's totally not important. So what we have here is up at the top, or sorry, not at the top, at the side, we have yellow words. These are all pronouns. And then next to that, we have green verbs. These are all high frequency verbs. Now we also have here words like eat and drink on the food page. See how these are green, so they're still verbs, so that ties it into that. But eat and drink don't need to be used when you're at PE or outside on the playground necessarily. And so we've chosen to put eat and drink on the actual food page where it's nice and handy. But we're also putting eat and drink kind of close over here with the other verbs. We have stop and negation down in this corner. We have pink prepositions, some purple question words, and some blue adjectives. You'll also notice that on the food page, we have more adjectives that belong on the food page. So we have hungry, thirsty, hot, and cold, which are all important food words as well. So sometimes we get this question about why don't we use photos for this? Well, there's limitations to using photos. Sure, if there's something specific, say for example, I know that I get questions about cultural foods. For example, I work with a Korean student, and one of her favorite foods is kimbap, which is kind of like a sushi roll, a Korean sushi roll. And when you looked in Boardmaker at the time, there were no sushi rolls, so we just took a picture off of Google Images. For sure, that happens. But then when you think about words here, like if I put the student's photo here for I, for example, that means that they are the only I in the world, right? But what if I am modeling something for the student and I want to say I? Then it doesn't make sense for me to do that. Also for the word like, say for example, the student likes trucks. And so we were like, okay, so let's substitute that like photo or like symbol and put the photo of a truck in there. But then what if we're eating and they like strawberries? Now it no longer makes sense to have a photo of a truck for like. And so photos work when you're doing nouns, but what we want to be really focusing on is this core vocabulary and balancing that with the highly preferred items. And it's impossible to find photos that will work in all contexts with this high frequency vocabulary. We don't expect the student to understand that right from the get-go, but there's many layers of what the student needs to learn in their course of learning to use the core Fringe book. So often they need to learn the meaning of the word, and that comes from association within their environment of the word with activities that are going on. So I need to learn what like means, the actual word. I need to learn the symbol or the image that I have in that button, but I also need to learn the location of this. And so we're going to be teaching in many, many ways across their day in order to support that learning. Another way that we can include images in the Core Fringe book in order to support literacy is if a student, for example, loves Oreos. When you think about the Oreo blue lettering, it's quite iconic. And you can actually find the logo of Oreo with the actual Oreo cookie popping out the top. So rather than having just the Oreo and a photo of that, I might put the logo with the Oreo cookie popping out the top and put that on the food page if that's something that's of high interest to them. And then gradually we can take away that Oreo cookie and just have that logo, and maybe the student will be one step towards literacy. And a lot of my students actually are really good with logos because they're on preferred things and they're very repetitive. So for example, down here, we have some examples of photos. So we have a tree, which is very, very well represented by a photo of a tree. Again, love is not a word that we can easily find a photo for. And then, so we have the written word go, which, just to remind you, written words are also symbols and they're abstract, and we need to learn how to read those. And so this is not outside the realm of what we teach in school anyways. It's just that we're taking, we're kind of using symbols instead of written words because they're easier to recognize. And again, there's that Oreo symbol that I was talking about. So levels. When we look at the different levels, we have different levels of the Core Fringe book. I don't know if you guys know that, but for the most part, for most of my students, I will put them on the highest level, which is this one here. And I find that the more vocabulary we have access to throughout the day, the more useful the vocabulary is, and the more it gets used across the day. But in case you need it, and in some cases this is an important step, we have different levels. So I'm going to compare the level 1 vocabulary with the full vocabulary that we have. So one of the features that you'll notice is that all the vocabulary is in the same place. So this is the level 1. So we have I and you in the same place, and we've left out this vocabulary and just left blank squares. And then you'll notice that all these verbs are in the same order as well. The reasoning is that if we're going to simplify, and we can remove symbols, and then they don't need to learn. Remember, we talked about how we need to learn the symbol, the word, but also the location. That location piece is very, very important. We call it motor planning. And it's the ability to sort of perform a motion without really thinking about it. And that's really important. So if I've developed a motor plan to tap here for I, we don't want to all of a sudden have I like way over here. And once upon a time we used to, or actually we still do this, but you may have, you may be familiar with, like having 4 symbols, and then once the student achieves that, then we increase to 8 symbols. But as soon as we increase to 8 symbols, things that were on the edge are no longer on the edge, things that were beside each other are no longer beside each other. And every time we do that increasing, everything gets moved around, and it can be very confusing for a student. And each time we do it, there's a bit of a learning curve. Whereas with this type of system, we're just sort of filling in blanks and increasing vocabulary, and we don't have to worry about adjusting the motor plan. Talk to your AAC SLP about which level will be right for you and your student. If the reason that we've put them on this is usually because their vision and their motor skills are enough that they'll be able to visually scan this, but also point to the small symbols. So it's just something to think about. I prefer to put students on this if at all possible, because it does support more generalized use across their day. So now we're on the slide about alternate core. Like I've said a few times in this video, if a student has adequate vision and fine motor skills to use that Core Fringe book that is standardized across the district, then we do put them on that. The reason is that EAs and support teams move around, and if it's something that they're familiar with a student from another school, it can really speed up their process of learning to use it with that student, as opposed to having a brand new board for each and every student. It also sort of streamlines our production line, and so we can produce them quite a bit faster than if we had to go through and select core vocabulary for each student and that kind of thing. If you're from another district or you know students in other districts, you might find that there are other shapes of core Fringe books out there. I know that VSB uses one, for example, that the core vocabulary is long and horizontal, and then their Fringe vocabulary is across the top. There's no research out there that says that a core Fringe book needs to look a certain way or be a certain shape. What the research does support is what the research does support is choosing specific core vocabulary words. And so what we've done is we've heavily researched our selections here and based our selections for core vocabulary on what the current best practice is. Now, if a student doesn't have adequate fine motor or vision abilities to use this core Fringe book, that's when we start to get into an alternate core board. The way you use it is exactly the same, but we would reduce the number of symbols on the page, and it might be bigger, for example, but these are very highly customized. We might also be using these in high schools where there's not a lot of time left for the student to learn, and we might just want to reduce our expectations a little bit and sort of simplify and really focus on a few things. So vocabulary considerations. One thing to think about is what is motivating for the student to communicate about. So if I had, I like chocolate. And so if I borrowed a book from a friend and they said, "Thank you very much, I know you like chocolate, here you go," that would be great. What a nice gesture. I love chocolate. Everybody's happy, right? But then I work for the North Van School District, and if they all of a sudden said, "Hey, Reiko, we heard you like chocolate, we're going to start paying you in chocolate instead of money," that would not be okay. And so what I just want you to think about is sometimes students, we're doing all the things, we're doing the modeling, but the student is still not communicating. Sometimes it's not enough to think about what do they like, what is chocolate to them, but we need to think about what is cash to them, right? Like what is the highest motivator that this student has. I remember a story I once heard at a course I went to, and the person was saying that the student that she worked with, elevators were the thing that he loved most in the world. So they went out into the community, went into an elevator, and then started with going up and down the elevator, and the student was requesting going up, going down, and things like that. And that's the first step to his communication. So if you're not having success with your student, think about the motivation piece. What do they love? I do work with some students that, for whatever reason, are just perfectly happy existing where they are, and they don't seem to be preferring one thing over another. I really recommend that you explore different activities. Maybe nobody knows that they like puzzles because they've never done puzzles with them, but then the student themselves might not know that they love puzzles because they don't understand puzzles. So it might take repetition of learning that routine of a puzzle before the student actually learns to enjoy the puzzle, and then finally it becomes a preferred activity. So explore new activities, use communication within them, but then also repeat those activities. Don't just say we tried the puzzle once and it didn't work. You need to keep repeating the puzzle so that the student learns to understand it. And you just really need to think what the student really wants. If the student makes a request, say the student asks for a banana, what do they want in that moment? Well, they want the banana. What I sometimes see as I'm working with people going out around to different schools is the student says banana or I want banana, and we are working on those requests. And the response from the communication partner is good job, nice talking. What they actually want in that moment is the banana. And so what they should do is the student should receive that banana within half a second of them requesting it. So you should already have cut up that piece of banana, that banana into pieces, so that when a student requests, you can give it to them right away, especially if it's at snack time or something like that. And the first thing you should do is say banana, even if you haven't cut it. You can show them, you can say, oh, I have your banana right here. Let me cut you a piece. Here you go. As opposed to saying nice talking, because the student doesn't want to hear nice talking, right? It is nice that they're talking, but that's not the reason that they talk. They talk to get the banana. So make sure that they're getting what they want when they do communicate. Now, updating vocabulary. When you're in a classroom, there's this constant change in vocabulary. We do units, first we're working on birds and we need all this bird vocabulary, and then we're working on icebergs and we need all the iceberg vocabulary. It can be a full-time job just to chase around the vocabulary for one student. So what do we need to update? How much do we need to do? So you need to ask yourself, number one, how motivated is the student to talk about these things? Like I said, I don't know any student who really wants to talk about worksheets. So even though you do worksheets in class, is it the most important thing to be in the student's communication book? I don't know. How often do you, the communication partner, talk about these things? If it's not something that you talk about very often, like say somebody brought some Beyblades to school and you just wanted to talk about the Beyblades because your student was interested, you could just point at the Beyblades, right? You don't actually need that to be in the book, because once the Beyblades go away, we might not continue to talk about them. So how long will you be talking about these for? So we have holidays and things that come and go, and we could update the vocabulary, but then as soon as we update the vocabulary, that holiday is going to be gone and we're not going to be talking about those things anymore. So we're not going to be talking about jack-o'-lanterns in February. So that's something to think about as well. Now, if it's personal core, if this is something that the student loves, we want to make sure that's in there. So I worked with a student who loved Thomas the Tank Engine, and actually she had some spoken language, and her spoken language for her Thomas the Tank Engine was quite extensive, but her clarity of speech for those words was very difficult. So she knew the difference between all of these Thomas the Tank Engines. She knew Thomas, she knew Edward, but then her communication partners didn't know what she was trying to say. So we made a page so we could kind of clarify with her, and that was a very important page to have. If it's something classroom culture-wise, this was actually taken from my daughter's kindergarten classroom, and this is something that they talk about across the day, across environments. When they walk down the hall to go to PE, the teacher just takes these symbols with her, and then if the class needs to be quiet, she might show this quiet symbol. That it's used all the time, and they sound like good life lessons. That might not be a bad thing to be in the core Fringe book. But then classroom themes, it kind of depends. This is again from my daughter's kindergarten classroom. There's a poem called Rainbow Hair. Now, color, good life skill, good thing for kids to know. So that might be a good thing to learn. Rainbow though, it would really depend on the student, right? Like rainbow might not be something that they need to have in their communication book. But then we have things like I said, Halloween. This vocabulary is going to be gone for a while, but you might kind of want it for inclusion. So I was in a kindergarten classroom and I noticed that they had a word wall and they had some Halloween vocabulary on the wall. So one idea might be to go into Boardmaker or something like that and just make some keywords. Like I just picked 4 words for the student to learn and printed it off on Boardmaker, and this is just in black and white. I find that some people get really hung up on color printing, but it's not available to them. Don't worry about getting all the color printing. If you really want it in color, the student can color it, right? Like this, it's an additional activity for them. This is just a little folded up piece of regular paper. You could put this on the desk, and these can be, their spelling words, or if this class is talking about Halloween vocabulary, then this is the thing that they could be referencing. You could also just take a picture of whatever visual they have on the wall and using that at the desk. And so you could also put something like this on the desk, or because really you're not going to be talking about this in PE. The other thing you can do is tuck it away for safekeeping in your core Fringe book, just so that it's available. And then whenever you need to talk about it, you can just pull it out and sort of do this, right? And then that's quick and dirty, and you can just sort of get rid of it once that Halloween season is over and you're on to the next thing. This is another thing that I found in my daughter's kindergarten classroom, and it was a lesson on apples. Apples, great, right? Everybody needs to know about apples. They're so prevalent in our community, especially if apples are preferred food. But when we think about words like leaf, stem, seeds, skin, flesh, is that important for our student to know? I mean, I don't know, really. But words like eat, red, green, big, small, more, these are all words that can also go with an apple. And so that might be something to think about. So I just took a picture of that and then printed it on a regular printer. Again, it's not even in color. And so if we want our student to participate in this activity with the class, I can either leave the words as is, or I can just take a Post-it, cut it up and cover up the words and think about other core vocabulary words that might go with the apple. And again, I can tuck it away into this little pocket for safekeeping and pull it out as it's available. I can do this and use the core vocabulary to talk about the apple, right? And this is still inclusion because the student is talking about the same topic as the class is, but they might have different educational goals. So it's a great inclusive strategy to do things that way. So once you've sort of made a decision about whether or not it's really important, one thing that you can do is just draw things in there. So if, for example, I have an activity page, if, for example, we decide that Beyblades are going to be my new favorite things, I would just take a pencil or pen and write Beyblades in there. And then either you might be able to find a sticker of a Beyblade, or you might be able to draw something very crudely, or you can print out something from Google Images to the right size and cut it out and glue it on. I've seen a lot of teams do a lot of really creative things for the effort of just not having to recreate a whole core Fringe book just to add one word. But I often don't laminate these pages because then it makes it really easy to edit. And you can just kind of do that on there. And then by the time you have a few more words that need to be added, say you have like 10 words that need to be added, well, yeah, for sure, let's update that page. But the easiest thing for us is if you actually take pictures of all your Fringe pages that need to be updated and send them to us, then we can update them much faster and easier. There's another video here about the power of core vocabulary. And it's just a great video to watch to really remind you of what we're, about the lifelong journey of AAC and what we're really shooting for and what we really want students to be able to do and communicate for themselves and advocate for themselves. And I find that this video is very powerful. So if you have a minute and 31 seconds, please take a second to watch that. So thank you very much. That was the Core Fringe training video, and we hope that you will have us in your schools, either to support you somehow or to have conversation with you about the Core Fringe books. But now you have a little bit of background, so when we're talking about core vocabulary, about modeling, you've at least heard these concepts before. Thanks, have a good day.